Welcome to the Springfield Armory. I'm on the road, on the way to the Springfield Armory National Historic Site and National Historic Landmark. Those are two different designations, I guess, and both of them apply. It's in downtown Springfield. It is free. I have lived an hour and a half away for 25 years, so not quite half of my life, and I have never been here. Never been actually to Springfield. Springfield, I mean, I've been in and around it, but never downtown. And that's a real shame because there's a lot of great things there. Springfield was one of these cities that essentially people immigrated to as the coast started to fill up. Springfield is nicely situated due west of Boston and along the Connecticut River, which runs north and south. So it's kind of got easy land access to Boston towards the east and easy water access going south to the Connecticut coast, kind of right splits the middle of Connecticut and gives nice access all the way down to the coast. Now it's not a major river like the Mississippi or something where you could bring really large watercraft up it, but you can navigate it. So it's a pretty wide river for this area. So Springfield, I have relatives from the late 1750s, 60s who had settled in Massachusetts and the surrounding areas in the late 1600s. One of them as an indentured servant because he was a Scottish rebel. Go Scottish rebels. They had basically spread across this area. They ended up going along the Connecticut coast. So I have relatives who lived in New London, Connecticut, which is a very important port city. And then from there they moved around 1750, 1770. More of them were coming here to Springfield. And I say here, I'm not quite there yet, but Springfield being kind of in the middle of Massachusetts was new land, new territory at the time, and because it had river access to the coast was a very, very important place. This all becomes crucial to why later on we build an armory here. And I say we, I mean the federal government of the United States. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but here's the situation. 1775, as I've been talking about for all of my video series, we have Patriots Day in Massachusetts, April 19, 1775. The shot heard around the world initiates the American Revolution. George Washington comes up here to take command of what is a ragtag army. He's kind of disgusted by them. It takes really several months to get things in shape. In those months, even preceding Washington's arrival, we have several battles, including the Battle of Bunker Hill. We have the siege on Boston. We steal some cannon. We drag them all the way to Boston. And from Dorchester Heights, we fire down on Boston and we drive the British out. So the siege on Boston ends up being successful for the colonists. The British have to vacate, and that history is fabulous. I encourage anybody to get into it. But that's not why we're here. The British then truck around along the coast of Connecticut and go right to Manhattan and seize Manhattan. Also a lot of great history to look at there. Now what do we have to do? Well, all of the people in New England especially were, many of them old-timers who'd fought in the French and Indian Wars, and as a result had longland Brown Bess muskets. Now, longland pattern is what I have. It's the musket that got me into this whole thing that I've been trying to learn how to fire for the last several. I got into it because I wanted to understand the life and times of these people and how they relied on these weapons to survive and to hunt and to protect their homes. They also used them to kill natives, which is terrible. But at the same time, these weapons became part of their homes, so much so that 2/3, about 66% of people in New England at the time, households in New England, owned a firearm, compared to 10% in Massachusetts today. So understand that we're talking about a weapon that was really critical, and people understood the Brown Bess, and they loved it. And there were rifles at the time, very few relatively, but mostly the musket was what people relied on. Well, now that you've declared war basically against the British, the premier army in the world, and and their premier weapons, which were manufactured at a very, very high rate of output, especially in times of conflict. And so they were well armed. They had a large disciplined army. I've said before, they trained on loading and firing their muskets every day. They were very, very good at this. Well, the colonists were in need of more arms now. If you're going to take on that army, you need more men, you need more arms. And you need gunpowder, which is a whole separate conversation we'll have later. But where are you going to get those arms? Well, turn to the French. This is one of the main reasons why we had such a positive relationship with the French. We had to. Thomas Jefferson was in France during much of this period. We had even Benjamin Franklin there. All of them delegates to France to try to make sure we had a positive relationship with the French monarchy, the French state, so that we could get a lot of things. One is naval support, and two, we could buy their weapons. Enter the Charleville musket. Now, the Charleville, this is something I didn't even know anything about. I've lived in New England all these years and studied the Brown Bess, the Brown Bess, the Brown Bess. Now, I'm having to learn about the Charleville, which is a really fascinating musket, and I'm so tempted to try to get a replica. So a little bit more about the Charleville. So the Charleville was unique, different from the Brown Bess. The Brown Bess is a 75 caliber barrel, usually using a 69 or 70 caliber ball. The Charleville is a 69 caliber barrel and uses typically a 62 or 63 caliber ball. It was a lot lighter, and I don't know if that's just because the barrel was a little bit smaller. I don't know how it could be so much lighter, because you still need a lot of iron in that barrel. But anyway, it was. And it also, the barrel attached to the stock in a way that was easier to maintain. But the other thing about the Charleville is that people maintain that it was more accurate in its fire. But I find it fascinating. And anyway, the point is, it's the Charleville that ends up getting used as the template. Not only do we import it all, but it becomes used now a decade later as the template for the Springfield Armory. So let's go back a little bit to where we are in terms of history. In 1777, so 1775, shot heard around the world. 1776, we have the Declaration of Independence, July 4th. That's what we celebrate, July 4th. That is Independence Day, marking the Declaration of Independence, even though winning the war was still, at that point, 7 years away. But the Constitution itself was even more years away. So 1777, when the Armory was created, we were using it to store weapons, not make them yet. Fast forward, the Constitution gets signed in 1787. I mean, I'm skipping right over the Articles of Confederation. Apologies for those of you who are big diehard fans of it. I'm not, but I think the Constitution was better. But the Constitution, 1787, the first two presidencies, we elected George Washington. Statesman without peer, honestly. I'm so taken with his leadership, so taken with what he did during the Revolutionary War, of course, and then as president. So, you don't think he's the best statesman ever? Fight me. Yeah, remarkable guy. But he wasn't elected president until 1788, after the Constitution was signed in 1787. So he served 1788, he was reelected in 1792, and then, of course, did that amazing thing, again, best statesman in history ever. After he was elected his second term and served his second term, he stepped down. Amazing. So, it was during his presidency in 1794 that we realized that we really needed to start manufacturing arms. There was always the threat that there would be a conflict with the North, what became Canada, British America. But really what was happening during the early years of the new republic was that there was a lot of armed support necessary for expanding westward, and that means conflicts with the natives, which is terrible. If you really want to just get a good quick summary of that, I would read David McCullough's book on the pioneers of the Ohio Valley. It's a really great book and kind of heartbreaking you know, I also study the Indian Wars of the late 1800s, also just heartbreaking. But that's one of the reasons that we needed a standing army, even though the Revolutionary War was over and we weren't in conflict technically with anyone. So what did Washington do? He said we need to start making our own weapons. And what did he do? He patterned they at the Springfield Armory patterned the very first musket after the, not the Longland pattern of the Brown Bess, but after the Charleville. After all the experience that we had so many copies that we could work from, so many different variations that we had exposure to, it made it easier to engineer the very first American-made arms in Springfield after the Charleville. I am almost there, and I'm very excited. I'll show you what I find. Here in the Springfield Armory, right there, that's the very first flintlock musket that was produced by the U.S. government for use in the militia commissioned by George Washington himself. Here's the display of the M1795, which is the Charleville musket that was then reinterpreted here by the Springfield Armory. This display lays out all of the manufacturing steps that had to occur. This was all completely hand done, precision done by individuals who were capable of making all of these pieces and then assembling them. And what happened next was the transition, let me see, 1816, to interchangeable parts. And funny enough, when I was in high school, I did a whole paper on this revolution, and I'm going to go back and reread some of that stuff where they could create identical parts that they could match in kits and then more rapidly assemble or repair rifles and muskets in the field. Just a remarkable advancement in manufacturing that they represent here in the museum. Here you're looking at the Blanchard lathe for carving regular gun stock. It's too complicated for me to break down here, but you've got the water wheel underneath the floor powering the drive belt, which then powers the machinery. But it's just amazing the way you put a metal, I guess iron model in one side, and then that guides the carving wheel on this side to carve an irregular shaped gun stock. The mind that created that, just astonishing to me, and a huge forerunner of everything that would later come in American manufacturing. In fact, this kind of precision manufacturing was called the American method of manufacturing, and people would come from all around the world to study it. Remarkable. This is the actual 1822 original Blanchard lathe. This is the wood stock that would be turned in it. Just remarkable. Here at the museum they have a video where they show this in operation at full scale, and mind-boggling. I think every engineer or wannabe engineer needs to see this and just be astonished. One of the things the Springfield Arsenal is most known for is the organ of muskets. Here you can see it. These are actually percussion, not flintlock, but percussion cap muskets. This was such a big deal here in the economy of the region that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a poem about it. Fascinating. It's still here. It's lit from all sides, so it makes for just some great images. I was curious what kind of people come here. Obviously, gun enthusiasts with a historical mindset are going to come here, but will anyone else come here? I know school groups come here, so I thought this was interesting. They ask people to put Post-its up with their comments, and it's interesting. You've got a lot of people here saying things against guns, ban guns. I won't go in and read them all, but I went through and read a few here. And a lot of people who were obviously pro-gun, and so much so that somebody had a commentary about somebody else's post. It's what in my last video I talked about, is the feelings that we have about each other because of the way we stand on the issues of guns. I really don't know where I'm going to go next in my whole journey about these weapons. I want to go Charleville musket next, but man, look at this Charleville pistol. Does that look crazy or what? I'm so interested. So I'm gonna have to do some kind of pistol, flintlock pistol at some point. There's enough kits out in the world that I can start there. Very interested in a particular number of pistol carrying individuals. Thomas Jefferson was one of them. But also one of my favorite is Tecumseh, who brandished 2 pistols everywhere he went. So there's some great history here. Highly recommend if you want to make a trip up this way. It's about an hour and a half outside of Boston, as I said, and totally worth the visit. And that was my time at the Springfield Armory. It was really spectacular. You're looking here at some just outside footage of the square where the buildings were located. It's now a community technical college. This is the mansion built in the 1840s for the commander that ran the facility. This is the view of the city from his admittedly very run-down mansion. I peeked through some of the windows and it's all empty in there. Springfield itself is a little bit like that. It was a big deal at the time, and there are some still very, like, this is a historic street that's just beautiful to go down, decked out for Christmas. Just some amazing old architecture, and what a rich history that this town has. And I'm glad they're able to preserve the Armory as part of that history. Oh, and of course, the Dr. Seuss Museum. Can't miss that as you're cruising through downtown Springfield. So I have a plan. I'm going to come back to this museum at least one more time and spend, instead of the 2 hours that I spend, I'm going to spend 3 or 4. They have some replica weapons that you can request to handle, and I'm going to do that. But I'm also going to dive a little deeper into some of the other collections, in particular the 1903 rifle, which is a huge deal. I haven't even gotten to World War I yet. So a lot to learn and all very exciting to share with you. Thank you.